Hey there, viewers, and welcome back to the Self-Made Auto Channel. That's a 2020 Toyota. It's got the big 5.7. Pretty low mileage. I think it was under 50K when I pulled it in. But this guy's had a problem that's been plaguing this truck, not quite since he's owned it, but for quite a while now, more than a year. Apparently, it used to be, when it was very hot outside, the truck wouldn't start after you've driven it. So it'd always start cold. You go out in the morning, fire it up, drive it around, everything was cool, shut it off. After that, let it sit about a minute and it wouldn't restart, just crank and crank and crank. Give it a little sniff of the Cosby sauce and boom, she's off to the races again. So that's kind of weird. But it was kind of intermittent and only when it was hot. Now, if it's above about 40 degrees outside, it does the same thing. And it's getting to the point where he just doesn't dare ever shut the truck off, especially if he doesn't have time to let it sit, or he doesn't want to get out and fill it full of ether to get it running. So he wants us to have a look at it, see what it is. I just started up and drove it in. It's still cold. Hopefully it, will restart. It fired up fine this morning. Didn't do anything funny when I brought it in. Fired up cold. He says, run it till it, gets up to temp. Shut it off. He goes, if you shut it off and then immediately restart it, it'll start, but it'll stumble a little bit and then, stay running. But if you let it sit for any period of time, 5 minutes, he's like, it'll just crank and never start. Supposedly, if you give it a little sniff, it'll start and run and seem just fine. It's full power, no lights on the dash, no check engine light, nothing weird. So it sounds like it'll be a fun one. I'm just gonna go through and do a full system scan on it, see if we do learn anything. And if not, I'm gonna jump into generic OBD2. 48,000 miles, how many miles are on? I'll plug this thing in. I'll jump into generic OBD2 and we're gonna look at just some parameters and see what things look like while it's still cold. And then kind of take it from there. Might look through some OEM data. Yeah, so it shows having 4 codes. There was no engine light on when I brought it in. But let me let this finish scanning and we'll see what we see. Let's see what the initial survey says. Startability fault. Imagine that. Rough idle engine stall history. Okay, so nothing really useful there. All right, we're gonna just leave these. Seeing loss of comm issues and stuff is not a big surprise. Generally speaking, I won't go into the OEM side of a scan tool when we're looking at, important data, because they will use substituted values, usually not without a code though. Intake air, ambient, just, we're looking at stuff like this, intake air, coolant temp, and the, barometric pressure. And these are all parameters that can have substituted values, if something has gone wrong. We're just going to kind of glance through stuff here. I'm not going to bore you guys with all of this unless I see something that really jumps out. He did say he left the gas tank intentionally low for us. This guy actually works at a shop, body shop. So he knows about cars coming in that are, dead empty, but he just figured if it ended up being something in the fuel pump, it's a whole lot easier to do it when the tank's low. And then he also left a 20 spot on the cup holder in case we had to put gas in it. So he covered all his bases. So kind of cruising through data here, both on the generic side and the OEM side. I don't see anything weird when it's cold. Really nothing jumps out, no pending codes, all the monitors are set. I don't know. At this point, I'm going to take and start it up, assuming it starts, and then let it sit here and run, let it warm up, and see if we can duplicate its concern. that run, seemed to start okay. Let it run. I'm gonna look through data here while it's warming up, see if anything jumps out to me. We're look at fuel trims, things like that. And then we'll shut it off and see if it starts. So it's just about warmed up, about 160 there. Let's see, we've had it running about 850 seconds, so about 14 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm gonna take, instead of just letting it sit here and run forever, why don't we shut it off, we'll shut it off, we'll start it right back up. See if we can see what he's talking about here. Go out there, shut it off. Fire it right back up. Oh, or we won't. Okay, so just a start stall situation. Okay, went on the third pop. I didn't touch the gas or anything like that. So that's interesting. We'll shut it back off again. Try it again here. Okay, I'm gonna switch feet here, give it some gas when it starts. I got it right to the floor, foot's off the gas. Try to start it again. Okay, nothing. I'm gonna try to put it in clear flood mode just for the hell of it. Nope, no change there. Interesting. So it's exactly as he says, and evidently if we give it some juice, it'll start. I'm not going to spray the Cosby sauce in it right now because I don't want to be responsible for exploding the plastic intake into a million pieces. He says he always has somebody help him do it. You know, somebody cranks, well, he sprays, and then, you know, and then apparently once it starts, at that point it's just off to the races and everything's normal. So it's doing exactly what he says it does. Knowing that he gives it some juice and it starts, that tells me it's a lack of fuel delivery. I mean, it must have spark, it must have injector pulse, it must have everything except fuel. But why, you know, I mean, if it was, you know, a weak fuel pump, something of that nature, how come when he sprays it with ether and it starts, it runs perfectly fine and continues to run fine and has no lack of power or anything like that? Looking at fuel trims are almost at 0%. The equivalency ratio on both banks was, 1. I mean, it was just, everything looked spot on the money on scan data. I'm going to leave it sitting here, key on, engine off, and okay, did kind of cough there. Tell you what, I'm going to cycle the key here. I'm just going to push the button a few times, let it cycle the fuel pump, and then we're going to try to start it. Acted like it wanted to start there for a second, didn't it? Yeah, it kind of gets just a little cough there, so that's quite interesting. I'm going to leave it key on, engine off. I'm going to go out and look through scan data again, see if anything looks funny, and then we're going to have to do some checks. We're going to see, I don't even know how you check fuel pressure on one of these. Hopefully it's got a port, and hopefully that tells us something. So I did get it running again. It looks like this is probably our feed line. Another line coming out of the injector rail, but that goes over to this side of the rail. But then there's another fuel line here. And I assume that goes back. I'm kind of surprised these are a return fuel system. I don't know much about these things. I just drive one. I don't work on it. They don't usually break, so. I say we unhook the fuel line here. We get a fuel pressure measurement. See if we can find a spec on it. Now, I did notice that the fuel pump duty cycle, sitting here at an idle, is at 53%. Not knowing what it should be. I'm pretty sure when I was looking when this thing was cold, it was around 20%, which is kind of what would be believable. The fact that this pump's running at half its capacity at an idle is kind of crazy. I looked in scan data, or on service data. Fuel pump duty cycle idling is normally 33%, is what they say. So this is a little high. So this is a little suspect, you know, that it's running that high. So that's kind of something to think about. Let me see if I can find a fuel pump pressure spec for us. See if we can get hooked on there. Now, I didn't spray anything in it to get it running. I just fiddled with it a little bit. Used the scan tool, put the fuel pump at 90% duty cycle. I kind of started installed a couple times, and then was able to catch it and get it running. So let me just go ahead and shut it off. That's the pump hooked up on there. We're going to go into turn the key on, and the fuel pressure didn't come up. Maybe these don't have a key on prime. I'm going to go to fuel pump speed. We'll go to custom list. Pick some fuel pump data out of here. Fuel pump duty. Right now we're at 0 PSI on the gauge there. I've got supposedly, oh, there it goes. It just jumped up to 45 PSI at 90% duty cycle. I'm going to shut it off. It's resting at 35 PSI. Turn it back on. There it goes. So it takes it a certain amount of time, so that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to shut this back off, and it's holding at 35 PSI. I think the spec according to the book was, what did it tell me? I think it said 42 PSI. So that's kind of curious. We're going to have to get somebody over here to crank this and see what's happening out here, if anything. I just want to see, we can control the speed evidently, but I think it only gives us 2 options. So what we just did there was 90% duty cycle. Let me see here what, okay, so we have a choice between fuel pump duty control, 25 to 80%. So 80%, we're sitting at 46 PSI. At 25%, we got nothing happening. Just static there at 35. I don't even know if the pump's running at this point. I just went to 80% and it's still sitting static. It was just a second ago when I had it at 80%, the gauge had actually jumped up. So this is kind of peculiar here. I wonder if something is going on with the pump. Right now, let me go back into fuel pump speed. We don't really need a data list. Oops. I just want to see if it'll jump up again. Turn the pump back on. We know that's 90%. Nothing's happening. I've got the fuel pump commanded on. All right, let me actually get a data list here, make sure we got something going on here. The other thing is too, you can never trust your scan tool. You guys know that. So never assume your scan tool is actually working. And it doesn't matter if you're using, you know, Toyota TIS or TechStream or aftermarket tool. So right now we've got it commanded at 90% and I've got nothing going on here. We're just sitting at our static 35 PSI where it's shut off. Just for grins and giggles, I'm going to leave this turned on. I'm going to go under there with the old plastic hammer, give a couple thumps on the tank. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm going to give it a couple love taps and see if all of a sudden this thing comes back to life, because that would be pretty definitive. Well, I didn't hear the pump kick on, and our pressure is still low. So just for grins and giggles, how about, here's what I suspect is going to happen. I suspect that, oh, there it goes. It just kicked on. Do you guys hear that? So the pump just kicked on right there. Now it's on again. Now it's not on again. All right, so if this is what's happening here, it stands to reason why this truck isn't starting. We need to verify this because, like I say, we don't trust the scan tool. I would like to see the vehicle start and stall and watch that gauge pressure go right to 0. That would be a great indicator for us. Let me go get Mrs. O. Everybody's busy right now. Nobody can help me for just a few minutes. We enhanced on that. Let me just start, crank it, see what happens. We'll come out and look. What's happening? Okay, so fuel pressure's down to about nothing. That's what happened. Let me crank it again. So that's definitely our issue, is lack of fuel pressure. What's so bizarre is that he can spray it with ether and get it going. That doesn't even make sense in my life. I want to see if we can sit here with the fuel pump on. So I've got it commanded on now at 90%, as you can see, but nothing's happening. So I'll give it a little bit of time, because last time we did this, all of a sudden it kicked on. It did just briefly come up there for a second. Oh, there it goes. Okay, let me see if we hop in this thing, Josh. Just don't shut the button off or anything. Just hold your foot on the brake and press it, see if it starts. I'm gonna leave the fuel pump commanded on here. Yep, go ahead. Yeah, I figured it would. I'm gonna shut this off. And right now the truck has it at 66% duty cycle. Okay, shut it off, Josh. Okay, take your foot off the brake and push the button there a couple times till it says on. The ignition's on now? Yep. Okay, so it's holding at 35 PSI. I'm gonna turn the pump back on. Yeah, and you can see it's nothing's happening here. I've got the pump turned on and we're just sitting there at 35. Okay, hold your foot on the brake and try to start it. Okay, shut it off. Start it again. Yep, look at that. I should almost run at 10 PSI. Okay. All right, you can go ahead and shut it off, Josh. All right, so we've identified the problem, so to speak. Engine's running itself out of gas, obviously. A couple players in this game. We have a fuel pump relay. We've got the fuel pump control module in the back there, and then engine computer, fuel pump, so on and so forth. Sorry, a customer walking out here. I had to cut that one short. I was saying that we have a few players in the game here. You know, we know that the reason the engine doesn't start is because it has no fuel pressure. So that's obvious. Why doesn't it have fuel pressure? We have, you know, the players here, as I just mentioned, engine controller, the fuel pump control module, or whatever they call it. There's a fancy relay back there on the left side of the frame rail on these Toyotas, usually rots out. We've seen that, but usually not on something this new. He gets this thing crowned, you know, oil sprayed, so I highly doubt that it's rotted out. So you've got that, you know, fuel pump ECU, or whatever they want to call it. It's just an electronic relay. Basically how it works, it's got a few modes of operation. The ECM sends a signal to the fuel pump ECU, or that relay back there, and can control it at different speeds based on the duty cycle output of the ECM back to the fuel pump ECU, fuel pump relay back there, and then that controls the pump speed. There is also a fuel pump relay in the box here that sends power back to the ECU or that other relay back there. You know, it's not an uncommon setup, you know, amongst makers. You know, there's several manufacturers that use a very similar system, so it's not overly complicated. What we need to do now is identify, probably the easiest thing to do is we'll start and work our way backwards. Is everything working and we've got power getting sent out to the pump and the pump's just junk? That would probably be my first step. We'll get it up in the air. We'll find the fuel pump ECU or the fuel pump relay that's back there on the frame, and we'll find the outputs going out to the pump, and we'll substitute a load. You know, we'll put a 4 amp load on it and we'll see what output it has. If all of a sudden, you know, we go to start the truck and bing, you know, this thing's lighting up a 4 amp test light nice and bright, but the pump's not running, rest is history. If we have no output from it, now we trace it further down the line. What are we missing on the input side? Do we have all of our inputs? If we've got, you know, a duty cycle being commanded from the ECU, from the actual engine computer back there saying, hey, turn on, we've got good powers and grounds, but it's just simply not turning on, easy. Then we just got a bad fuel pump ECU. I don't know what properly call it. People get all bent out of shape when you call stuff by the wrong terms, but it's just a fancy relay. So it's going to be difficult to record at best. Here's the fuel pump module, the fuel pump relay, whatever you want to call it, fuel pump ECU, back here on the left frame rail. Now I just back probed it with a low current light, so 194 just in the fuel pump circuit. Got our scan tool here so we can turn it on. So pump's running right now, and then this is the output that I'm hooked in. I'm just tapped in with the fuel pump output. But can you guys hear that pump? I don't think it sounds great. I'm gonna shut it off, go back on, off, on, oops, shoot, clicked the wrong button. See if we can get it to act up. I went and ate lunch, so the vehicle probably cooled off too much. Okay, I got it turned on right now. Look what it does. There it goes, it kicks on. So I think, we probably have to look at the theory and operation, but I'm wondering if when you turn that module on, it sends a signal, you know, to the pump, and then probably looks for some current feedback or something to say that, hey, the pump's running. Shut it back off, back on. See if we can get that to act up again. There it goes. See? So you'll watch it, I'll let this pump run for a little bit. I got a battery maintainer on it as well, which might be kind of burning us a little bit, but there it goes. And there it goes, it kicked itself back on. Let me tell you what, let's unplug the battery maintainer so our voltage drops a little bit in case that's kind of giving us some, because typically you're not gonna have, you know, the 13 volts that we had, you know, initially. Yeah, so you can hear the difference in the pump now. Try to get it to act up. Leave it off for a few seconds here and see if it'll act up for us. Yep, there it goes. Okay, let me leave it turned off for a while now that it's warmed up. What we should do, we should throw a current clamp around that output and see what this pump looks like. It could just be drawing a crap ton of current. And that might give us a clue as well. Leave it on here for a bit. I'll wait till it's broke. put our current clamp up on the output. So we've got the light there. You can see it's flashing. Hopefully you guys can see that. I've got it commanded on the pump is not running, and I've got the current clamp on the output going to the fuel pump. So the ECU is receiving a signal from the engine computer saying, hey, turn on. It's trying to turn on. It's pulsing there, as you guys can see. And that's just part of its strategy. It's trying to turn the pump on, but how do we know it has connection to the pump? Because we come down here and look at this. It's kicking on every time that thing pulses, and it's drawing over 16 amps. Let's see here. So every time that light bulb lights, now this isn't measuring the current of that light bulb. And even if it was, it's only 150 milliamps. So before everybody gets off on that tangent. But yeah, over 20 amps that thing's drawn. So that's really interesting. So that pump is seized up, and the module there is trying to get the pump started. Let's see if we can get the pump started for it. Look at that, we got the pump started. And now it's working just fine. What's interesting, so it's drawn about 9 amps, I would say. Looking at the commutators, the best we can see there, no big dropouts. It's not open, it's seized. That pump is seized up, or it's seizing up. Yeah, we're drawing roughly 9 amps, thereabouts. It's easier than trying to use the cursors. Yeah, so about 8.99 amps, little bit high. I would think this thing would probably be around, a kind of rough rule of thumb, don't take it with a grain of salt, but about 1 amp per 10 psi. This thing only runs about 40. I would think somewhere between 4 and 6 amps would probably be normal. I suppose we could go check my truck, but at this point it doesn't matter. It's our diagnostic tool right there says it's the fuel pump. It didn't work for us the first time because we didn't know it had that pulsing action that it was. So let's set her down to 25%, and this is where it's kind of curious. It just holds there steady at like 7 amps. You can beat on that tank all day. It will not start at a 25% duty cycle. Run it up to 80, and now we're right back because we've just had the pump sitting here running for some time. So it doesn't matter so much how long the truck runs, it's how long the fuel pump's been running. And you can see that. Could have chose a better scope for us to use, but you can see every time that light flashes trying to turn that pump on, that pump is seized up. So this simply needs a new fuel pump. So that's it, folks. It's pretty definitive. It just has a bad fuel pump. Oddly enough, I wouldn't have called the fact that it had a bad fuel pump. The pump must still be able to build, an appropriate amount of pressure, but there's something in it that's mechanically binding, that's stopping it from rotating. Only when it's hot, or when it's warmed up, which is kind of interesting. That's it. I think that he can get that fixed for free. The reason he didn't want to take it to the Toyota dealer initially is because he didn't want them to just unload the parts can. He knew they wouldn't diagnose it. They would just start hanging parts on it until, something worked. And I think the fuel pump's under warranty, but like the module and that stuff wasn't. And he didn't want to have to pay a whole bunch of money out of pocket until they finally, got the right guess. So he just wanted me to diagnose it. So I'm certain that we won't get the job, particularly if he can go have this done for free, which would be great. And then now he's got some definitive proof. He's got a little video he can show them, so that way they don't have to, do a bunch of guessing, hopefully, at his expense. Hopefully you guys understood this all, why. So some things that I think of as like that fuel pump ECU, we'll call it, as it pulses to turn that pump on. It must have some sort of logic when it detects an excessively high current that it can shut itself off. So that's kind of cool. It has its own circuit protection, even though the rest of the circuit is protected by a fuse. It is very interesting how it does that. I don't know if I'll find that in service info. I don't believe that I will, because I did look initially to see what the theory and operation was on this fuel pump ECU or the fancy relay and how it works and what are the different modes of operation. It didn't say anything about overcurrent protection, but clearly you can see it has some sort of ability to do that, whether it's by design or if it's because of a physical component that I don't understand. Not a big electronics guy, so I don't know circuit board wise if there's a component it can have on there that limits itself without being told to limit itself, if you will. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask Big Clive about that. He's a big electronics guy. That's it. In case you're wondering, this is the non-flex fuel pump ECU. That's what we were just hooked into those two wires. So these are the pin 1 and pin 2, the blue and red that goes directly to the pump. And then you have a power supply that comes from a fuel pump relay. You've got the ground, and then this white wire that runs from the engine computer for your fuel pump control. And that's where it sends its duty cycle signal to this ECU to let it know, how much duty cycle to turn the pump on. So we'll leave it at that. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy diagnosis. Answered all of our questions. Why does it stay running? Well, maybe we didn't. I thought about this one in my head, but why does it stay running when he gives it some sauce? Well, it's the same reason that we couldn't get the pump to quit with the stinking battery maintainer hooked to it, is because once he gets the vehicle running, voltage goes up and it can overcome the mechanical seizure of that pump, with some more available current. That's the best I can come up with there because there's no other reasonable explanation. But anyhow, now he can take it to Toyota. He did call them. If it is the pump, they said they will cover it, which is great. And at least now he has a straightforward 100% diagnosis. This is what you need. So if they tell him that he needs, everything, then he can say, no, don't do it. They're not going to waste his money. And then, go to the next Toyota dealer and just keep, going until he can get one of them to replace the pump for him. So that's it. Comment section, folks. Questions, comments, Insta, the Facebook. Let me know how you would have went about this problem and, what steps I missed and how you would have solved that. Be curious to know about that. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.